Welcome to Perfectionism, Real Life Effects presented by Amy Lamb. My name is Susan and I work in adult services at the Middendorf-Credell branch. This class is being presented by the District 8 Toastmasters in Eastern Missouri and Southwestern Illinois. Toastmasters International's mission is to empower individuals to become more effective communicators and leaders. District 8, founded in 1940, provides members with a supportive atmosphere in which to develop their communication and leadership skills.
And hello, my name is Brian and I work in the Catherine Linneman branch of the library. Toastmasters isn't a class, but an experience featuring a learn by doing program. We teach the skills of running a meeting, giving prepared speeches, providing and receiving feedback, speaking without preparation, and holding an office. Beyond the club, Toastmasters also conduct fun special events, such as speech contests and conferences. Please visit their website, www.dist8tm.org, and I'll put that in the chat for more information. And we'll add this information to the chat.
Amy, welcome. The floor is yours.
All right, thank you everyone. I do have some slides, so I'm going to start by sharing them. Give me 1 second. All right. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Amy Lamb. I am a certified public accountant who works as a manager in the internal audit department of a Fortune 250 company located here in St. Louis, in the St. Louis metropolitan area. So why am I here speaking to you about perfectionism? Because I am a recovering lifelong perfectionist. I understand from firsthand experience both the positive and negative effects of perfectionism and how it can have those effects on a person. I want to share those experiences with you today in the hope that you will learn from them in the ways that I have. I want to start off by telling you a story. Within Toastmasters, we have a peer mentor program. This means each new member is assigned a more experienced member to help them get started in Toastmasters. I was assigned as a mentor for one of our less experienced members, and she was trying to get up her courage to do her icebreaker. The icebreaker is the first speech you give in Toastmasters. It is 4 to 6 minutes long and designed to be about a subject that you know very well, you. This individual was well-spoken. She always spoke at a slow and steady pace and was very articulate, easy to hear and understand. She appeared confident and in control of herself. She had been in Toastmasters for quite a while at that point and had taken on many roles, but she had never given a speech. Now, it can be very nerve-wracking to get up in front of people and give a speech, but most people are willing to do their icebreaker fairly soon after joining the club. That is why they're there, right? But upon talking to this individual, I learned that she had actually had her icebreaker written for months, but hadn't given it yet because it wasn't perfect. She just kept adjusting it and tweaking it, but never took the next step forward because her fear of her very first speech not being exactly right was stopping her. This person did eventually give her icebreaker, and while I was unfortunately not able to attend, I am told that it was very personal and heartfelt, even making some people tear up. She did a great job. Unfortunately, while you think that win would give her the peace of mind she needed to continue forward, it didn't. She still holds back from presenting until she has the time to make sure that her speech is perfect. I started with this story because I think it fairly represents both the good and the bad of perfectionism. When this person gave her speech, it was by all accounts spectacular. It was well written and clearly well rehearsed. However, it is the only speech she's given. Her perfectionism is holding her back from continuing to learn and improve herself. Today, I want to cover what perfectionism is, including both the good and the bad that can come from it. My goal is for you to be able to spot in yourself or others perfectionism behaviors reflective of the negative side of perfectionism. I want to help you understand where perfectionism comes from and why people stay as perfectionists, even if it's personally harmful to themselves. And I want to go through some ways someone with perfectionism can make changes in their lives that reduce the harmful effects of perfectionism. Let's start with the definition. What is perfectionism? According to Google, perfectionism is a noun meaning the refusal to accept any standard short of perfection. Now, that doesn't sound so bad. If anything, that sounds like a really good thing. It's almost like something you would put on your resume or an application. Strengths, perfectionist, but knows how to have fun. But what is perfectionism really? The simple answer is the belief that making mistakes is unacceptable, that whatever is done must be done error-free. That still doesn't sound so bad, but who here has never made a mistake? We are all human, and humans make mistakes regularly. This is where perfectionism has its downfall. The real definition of perfectionism, and the one I will be using throughout the presentation, is as follows. The relentless striving for extremely high standards that are personally demanding, while judging your self-worth based largely on your ability to strive for and achieve such unrelenting standards, and experiencing negative consequences for setting those high standards, yet continuing to go for them despite the huge cost to yourself. Keep this definition in mind as I will be referring back to it. When exhibiting perfectionism behaviors, what it really comes down to is, does that behavior support a healthy and helpful pursuit of excellence? Or does it result in unhealthy and unhelpful striving for perfection? Looking back at my intro story, we see that the individual described wanted to better her communication skills. That's why she joined Toastmasters. But her perfectionism behaviors were stopping her from doing that. Instead, they were giving her an unhealthy and unhelpful striving for perfection. When you have a healthy pursuit of excellence, you get a lot of the benefits people often associate with perfectionism. You are likely someone who pursues excellence and has high standards for yourself. If you have a healthy pursuit of excellence, you are often aiming to learn and develop new skills. And you usually achieve good results in what you do. People like this are often seen as hard workers and dependable, positive attributes most of us want to have. But when you have an unhealthy striving for perfectionism, you then find that those positive attributes you get from pursuing excellence isn't enough for you. You often find yourself frustrated with yourself and unsatisfied with your achievements. When you're striving for perfection, it's not about doing your best, it's about doing the best. That means you have to exceed your high standards every time. And if it's something that you do repeatedly, you have to do even better than before. The excessive drive to excel is self-defeating, as it leaves you little chance of actually meeting your goals to begin with, and even less chance of feeling good about yourself doing it. If you meet your goal, then there may be a moment of happiness or relief, but it doesn't last. Maybe you did something that others also strive to do, but where you would be happy for or even proud of another person, that feeling doesn't last for you because all you did was what you had expected of yourself. Anything less, no matter how hard you tried, how much effort you had put towards it, would be seen as a failure because you didn't meet the standard you had. And if you had exceeded your goal, well, maybe your goal was too low to begin with. Either way, it doesn't really matter because you still have to do better next time. Any satisfaction you have is fleeting because you still have other goals to achieve, other standards to meet. People who have an unhealthy strive for perfection often find themselves procrastinating for fear of not being able to do a task perfectly. I know this seems somewhat contradictory because doesn't pursuing higher standards mean you're constantly improving yourself? But think back into my intro story. This person signed up for a program that would give her a safe space to practice and improve her communication skills. It's something she wanted to do for herself. However, she isn't getting the benefit from it that she could be getting because her fear of not being perfect keeps her from moving forward. People who have an unhealthy strive for perfection often also have low self esteem. As noted in the definition, perfectionists usually link their own self worth to achieving their high standards. But when you are never satisfied with your achievements, even when you're successful, how do you think you feel when you don't achieve your standard? You feel worthless or like a failure. As humans, we don't always hit our goals. And when you find yourself often feeling like a failure or like you aren't good enough, it brings down your own self esteem. The accumulation of setting high goals for yourself and linking your self worth to achieving those goals can result in increased tension and stress without the offsetting feelings of accomplishment, satisfaction, or reward for your hard work. This can lead to potentially severe negative consequences for yourself, including depression, anxiety, OCD, or eating disorders. I want to take this moment to tell a personal story of mine that I hope will help put these points into perspective. I showed an aptitude for learning at a young age. I remember learning to read a book in preschool and receiving extra attention from my teachers for it. They took me around and had me read the book to others. I also remember being put in an advanced math class starting in kindergarten. Again, I received praise for it. By the time I got a bit older, though, the message of good grades, that good grades were desirable, had mutated in my head towards perfectionism. For me, doing well in school meant nothing less than getting straight A's. Anything else was simply unacceptable. Receiving straight A's was no longer something I expected praise for or even felt proud of. It was just what I had expected of myself. When I did get praise, I didn't really believe I deserved it, and instead had convinced myself that I would be punished if I got anything less than straight A's. This unhealthy strive for perfection resulted with me getting straight A's all through grade school and graduating towards the top of my class, which are good things. But I didn't feel proud about it then, and I still struggle to feel proud about it now. This unhealthy strive for perfection also resulted in me having so much anxiety that I ended up in my favorite grad school professor's office, completely in tears, apologizing for getting a C on one of his tests. Now, I am not an overly emotional person, but I felt so much shame for getting a C on one test that I couldn't control myself and just fell apart the next time I saw him. I felt like I had failed him and that he would lose respect for me because of one grade on one test. Were the good grades I received worth that level of anxiety and low self esteem? I think most people would say no, which leads me to my next question. How does someone become a perfectionist? There's no simple answer to this question because everyone is different with their own unique experiences. However, there are a few common reasons. Some people learn their perfectionism directly through positive or negative behavior reinforcement. An individual may learn that achieving a high standard is desired by the world and worth pursuing through positive praise by others. This is something desirable. We want to teach our children to value things that society values because it will help them be successful in life. However, the problem lies when the beliefs develop to become rigid or inflexible. Use my grades as an example. The positive reinforcement for good grades that I received mutated in my brain became generalized and rigid. This turned something that was generally a good behavior into the belief that people will only be proud of me if I get good grades. And when that becomes linked to a person's own self-worth, it turns into I am only worthy if I get good grades. Through negative behavioral reinforcement, or even just the lack of positive behavioral reinforcements, something similar can happen. For example, if an individual is punished for making mistakes or errors, they may internalize the message that they should feel bad about making mistakes. And that could turn into the belief that I must never make mistakes. Another example is when a child is only praised for the achievements, not their hard work or personal progress. If someone is only praised when they win at a sport they're playing, they can internalize that they're only worthy of being praised or should only be proud of themselves if they win. That working hard towards a goal, getting better at a skill, or even just having fun doesn't really matter unless they win. I want to use another personal story to provide an illustration of how this type of thinking can affect someone. I like to paint and have as far back as I can remember. I enjoy the activity while I'm painting, but I am never quite satisfied with the result. You know, the saying that we're our own worst critic, that's totally me. I see every flaw I make, every line that doesn't turn out the way I wanted. I know I'm not a top tier artist, and because of that, I get a ton of anxiety thinking about painting. So much so that I never really get any better at painting because I can rarely bring myself to do it. Currently, the only time I really paint is when I promise to make something for someone else because my desire to be dependable overrides my own anxiety. In this way, the behaviors I was taught growing up, that I should strive for excellence and should do things without making mistakes, works against me because I now have to fight my own anxiety every time I do something that I really do enjoy doing. This type of thought process has made me reluctant to try new hobbies or develop new skills because I know I won't be as good as other people in doing them, rather than allowing me to value the learning process or just have fun participating. Two additional ways an individual can become a perfectionist includes indirect learning and natural temperament. Indirect learning is learning through observation rather than a specific behavior reinforcement. It's also called modeling, as we may learn to act in a particular way based on the way we see other people around us, our role models, behaving. I learned a lot of my work ethic behaviors through indirect learning. My dad worked hard for us. He took every opportunity he could to pick up overtime and spent much of his free time working around the house. When he did take time to relax, he would often spend it complaining about how he should be doing something more productive. While this helped instill a strong work ethic in me, my brain also interpreted this to mean that work should be my top priority, and any time not spent towards achieving something was me wasting my time. Which leads me to temperament. You will notice all of the situations I've described could have gone completely differently if my brain hadn't interpreted the messages being taught to me in the way that it did. My brain took positive behaviors being instilled in me and did something unintended, linked them to my own self-worth, which has resulted in negative consequences to myself. I believe I was prone to this type of thinking, and someone else who wasn't may not have developed the same mental linkages I did if they had been taught even the same values and the same behaviors. So let's go back to our definition of perfectionism. The relentless striving for extremely high standards that are personally demanding. We've covered what this is and how one may learn that they should be striving to meet an extremely high standard. Judging one's self-worth based on their ability to achieve those standards. We've learned how one with the right temperament may link perfectionism behaviors to their own self-worth. And experiencing negative consequences for setting high standards, yet continuing to go for them despite the huge cost to yourself. We've discussed what some of those potential negative consequences can be, but it still leaves the question, why would someone continue this way of thinking and acting if it has such huge cost to oneself? As we develop our life values, routines, and habits, we also develop rules for living. These may not be something we really think about, but they are something we act on during our daily lives. For example, you may have a rule for living such as it's important to be kind to others whenever possible, or if I commit a crime, I will be punished for it. These types of rules are helpful for conducting our lives. However, a perfectionist will often set inaccurate or inflexible rules for living. Think back to my story about my grades. My rule for living was you will get straight A's, which had had an implied underlying assumption of if I don't get straight A's, I am a failure. This was an inflexible rule because it didn't take into consideration for any of the effort I was putting into achieving my grades or my learning progress. And the underlying assumption was simply inaccurate. Getting less than an A would not have made me a failure to anyone. My parents, my teachers, society in general, no one. A perfectionist often sets the rules for living through unhealthy ways of thinking. There are many unhealthy ways of thinking that drive perfectionism. Here are just a few and examples of the rules of living or assumptions based off each type. First, the drive to set even more demanding standards. As an example of a rule for living, if I don't strive to achieve higher standards, I am lazy and useless. Fear of failure. If I try, I will just fail anyways. Constant checking on one's behavior. I have to weigh myself several times a day to make sure I'm not gaining weight. Simplicity, structure, and control. I can't let anyone else do this task in case something goes wrong. All or nothing thinking. This is my personal favorite. If I eat any chocolate at all, then I've just blown my diet and I might as well eat everything. Using shoulds and musts. I must be perfect or others will realize what I'm really like. Or self-control. I must work all the time or I'll become a lazy slob. Rules for living drive the actions we take in our lives because they dictate what we consider acceptable or unacceptable behaviors for ourselves. And they set the standard that we evaluate ourselves against. Think of a rule of living that you have. It could be something like, I try to be kind to others when I can, or I wear seatbelts when riding in cars, or I value being clean, so I shower every day. Overcoming perfectionism requires you to analyze and challenge your unhealthy rules for living and the assumptions they are based on. How difficult would it be for you to challenge your rules for living, including the one you just thought of? Healthy or unhealthy, rules for living becomes the foundation of our lives. Making changes to our foundations is a difficult process. As we discussed at the beginning of the presentation, many behaviors held by perfectionists are highly valued by society and actively reinforced by others. Students receive good grades and are praised by others and may even receive rewards for it. Maintaining physical attractiveness, good health, and cleanliness is rewarded by society. And a strong work ethic could result in a better job opportunities or even promotions. While perfectionists often are aware of the negative consequences that go along with their perfectionism behaviors and ways of thinking, they are often reluctant to give them up for fear of losing the positive rewards and reinforcements that go with those behaviors. So how does one recover from perfectionism? To change perfectionism, you must first identify that there is a problem. Perfectionism is maintained via a vicious cycle that sometimes results in positive consequences, but oftentimes results in something negative. You receive straight A's, and anything less is unacceptable. You give up time that you could have spent socializing or relaxing to achieve those straight A's, but you receive praise for it. That's a positive. However, you knew that you had to get straight A's, so the praise doesn't really have a lasting effect. And you start looking towards the next class that you have to get straight A's in. You have anxiety about not achieving your desired grade. And you remember the last time you got a B and how much of a failure you felt like. You know you are only one mistake away from getting a B and losing the respect of all of your teachers. This is a negative. To change perfectionism, you have to weigh the helpful aspects against the harmful aspects and make the decision to change. Similarly to any behavior change, you have to choose to make the change. No one can make the decision for you to force those type of changes on you. You have to be the one to choose to change. Once you've decided to change, though, the first thing you should do is set a goal for change. Most perfectionists exhibit perfectionism behaviors in multiple areas of their lives. For me, it was primarily in my studies and my work. But for other people, it could be housework or cleaning, staying organized, their eating or weight, their grooming, sports they are in. Pretty much anything that you do, you can be a perfectionist about. If you are a perfectionist in multiple areas of your life, you may want to try to change it all at once, but you can't reasonably expect to be able to do that. That's a sign of all or nothing unhealthy way of thinking, mentioned a couple slides ago. So when deciding you want to set a goal for yourself, you need to first start off by choosing the area of your life you want to work on first. You next need to identify the unrelenting high standard that is driving the perfectionism in the area of your life. Once identified, you then need to consider what would be a more reasonable standard. To assist with this, you can think, what would other people consider to be a healthy standard that you could work towards? Or even, what would I consider a reasonable standard for others in this area? An example of this could be the high standard of I will meet every deadline at work, no matter what, can be turned into I will work hard to meet my deadlines, but it's okay to meet some and not to meet some when there are competing priorities. Next, you need to identify a specific perfectionism behavior you want to work on. That behavior should relate to a standard previously identified. For example, the standard, I will meet every deadline at work, no matter what, could be supported by the behavior, I work until 9 every night. Once the behavior you want to change has been identified, you should set a goal that involves how you would change that behavior. I work till 9 every night could be changed to I will leave work on time at least 2 days a week. And finally, you should set a time frame for yourself to work on changing that behavior. While this sounds like a simple process, it isn't easy because change isn't easy. Do you remember the last time you tried to change an existing behavior or create a new habit? I know I did and failed horribly at it. Once our behaviors are ingrained in us, in our routines, it takes a lot of mental and emotional effort to make those changes. But there are some coping tips you can use that'll make it easier for you. Practice. Practice makes perfect. How many times have you heard that? For a perfectionist, you are actually practicing to not be perfect, but the principle still applies. You may not get it right the first time. Keep trying and it will get easier. Give yourself permission to make mistakes. We all make mistakes. In fact, some of our most valuable learning comes from taking a non-judgmental look at the mistakes we are making. This is very hard for a perfectionist to do. But if you go into it knowing that you're going to make mistakes, it makes it much easier to accept them when they occur. Remind yourself of the unhealthful consequences of your perfectionism. You made the decision to change for a reason. You carefully weighed the good and the bad from your perfectionism behaviors and decided the bad outweighed the good. When times get tough, remind yourself of the reasons you want to change. And reward yourself often. Changing behaviors is hard. Give yourself a pat on the back when you accomplish something outside of your comfort zone, no matter how small it is. Using the previous example, maybe you leave at 7 instead of 9. That's still an accomplishment, and you should be rewarded for it. There are also common obstacles you may come across while trying to make behavior changes. To help you be successful, you can prepare a plan for how you will handle these obstacles. Fear of change. This is a point I brought up earlier on, and is one of the reasons why perfectionists often stay in the cycle of perfectionism. It's easy to fear you will lose the positive benefits of being a high achiever if you give up some of your perfectionism behaviors. You may even fear you will have no standards at all if your standards aren't unrelenting. An example of this that I think many of us relate to regards the consumption of sweets. Someone who is a perfectionist around their body weight or self-image may never allow themselves to eat sweets. They may fear allowing themselves to have one cupcake will result in them eating the entire batch. This is a pitfall of the all or nothing unhealthy way of thinking. We don't live in a world that is all or nothing. To overcome this fear, we have to remind ourselves that plenty of people live happy, healthy, and successful lives without being a perfectionist. As a perfectionist makes changes to their behaviors, they too will see firsthand that the world doesn't fall apart when those behaviors are changed. Minimizing. It's easy to forget how personally taxing the negative consequences of your perfectionism may be when you're having a good day. When the going gets tough while trying to make changes to your behavior, it's easy to minimize the problems that you had to begin with because minimizing them may feel like the easier option. If you find yourself doing this, you may want to get an outside opinion. Would someone else agree that the negative consequences you feel aren't really that big of a deal? And you should use the coping tip of reminding yourself that the unhelpful consequences of your perfectionism and why you decided to change in the first place. Extreme self-criticism. This is one obstacle I personally relate to a lot. When your self-worth is linked to being perfect and you're human, thus not perfect at all, you often have a lot of negative self-talk. You find yourself speaking to yourself in ways that you would never speak to somebody else. Why are you doing this? You can't change. Why even try? You made a mistake. You're worthless and stupid. Just give up. These thoughts are driven by the unhealthy way of thinking that comes with perfectionism, such as the all or nothing thought process or the reliance on shoulds or must. I should be doing this. I must be doing this, and I'm not, so I'm lazy or dumb. Things like that. Overcoming this self-criticism could be an entire workshop all on its own. But the method I found most helpful is to learn to identify when you are experiencing negative self-talk and to rewrite what you're saying to yourself in a positive manner. For example, you made a mistake, you're worthless and lazy, could be turned into, you made a mistake. You have learned from that mistake and you won't make it next time. You're continuing to develop your own skills. I want to point out that throughout the entire presentation, I have referenced the high standards perfectionists set for themselves, the often inflexible rules they live by, and the inaccurate assumptions those rules are based on. These all apply to the perfectionists themselves. Most perfectionists don't hold other people to those same standards. The negative self-talk that they have isn't something they would ever say to a friend in the same circumstances. This double standard is another example of how toxic perfectionism can be, and the related unhealthy ways of thinking can be also. And finally, the final obstacle to overcome I want to discuss is one that's outside of all of our control: life circumstances. Life happens sometimes. Stressful events such as illness, the recent death of a loved one, a major life change, a global pandemic. These types of things can take a lot of a person's energy, leaving little left to focus on making controlled changes in their life. If this is the case, really think about if now is the right time to tackle your perfectionism. It's okay if it isn't. But if you decide it isn't, make a commitment to yourself to reconsider the issue in a particular time in the future, such as 3 months or 6 months, sometime after that circumstances has passed. I hope today you walk away with a better understanding of what perfectionism is, including both the good and bad that comes from it. I hope you are now able to spot in yourself and others perfectionism behaviors. I hope you now understand where perfectionism comes from and why people stay as perfectionists, even if it's personally harmful to themselves. And I hope you have a better understanding about how you can make changes to your own perfectionism behaviors, or how to help encourage others to make the decision to change their own lives. And with that, I will open it up for questions. All right, I see there have been a few in the chat. So let me pull those up. Kia, you're that way with cooking. You say you love baking. I actually just bought a cookbook, Kia. I'll have to share it with you. But you don't like it when it doesn't turn out perfect. I completely understand. I actually, the story I told at the very beginning about Toastmasters, and it was another individual in Toastmasters that did it. But my own personal Toastmasters story is very similar as well, where I actually spent maybe the first year I was in Toastmasters not doing any speeches, because I was terrified of it and terrified I was just going to make a huge debacle of it. And one of the things that I actually saw that I thought made me a lot more courageous and willing to do those speeches without them being perfect was our president at the time was a terrible speaker. He tried, but he had so many filler words when he spoke, but he always did it anyways. He would get up there and fill any role he needed. He would do speeches off the top of his head. And it was excellent encouragement to me personally to see someone that was experienced making mistakes and being okay with it. It helped me focus on my own skills and not being perfect, but learning how to recover for when I did make mistakes. All right, Dawn, you probably have a lot of friends that'd be happy to hide the evidence for you. Yeah, I wish a lot more people talked about this. I don't feel like it happens as often, and I think people should be a lot more open about it. And are women more likely to be perfectionists than men? I don't actually know the answer to that question. I think most of the people I've talked to about it have been women that are willing to open up about it. However, I don't know if there's a statistical study on that or not, but that's actually really interesting. I'd be very curious to hear if there is a difference in because of gender. All right. Susan,
All right.
I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, thank you. Amy, thank you so much for sharing your presentation. We thank you for partnering with us and bringing these great resources to the library's viewing customers. Please be sure to visit our website, mylibrary.org, for more virtual programs. Many of these are recorded and can be watched at a time that is convenient for you. Thank you for joining us this evening and have a wonderful night.
Yeah,
Bye, everyone.